Could Charles Manson, one of history's most infamous figures, have been more than just a manipulative cult leader? Some believe his story threads through one of the darkest chapters of US government experimentation, MK Ultra. It's a chilling possibility. A man who orchestrated horrific murders, potentially shaped by the same clandestine program designed to control minds. The 1960s were a fever dream of chaos, revolution, and paranoia, a decade teetering on the edge of its own sanity. Beneath the haze of counterculture and rebellion, there were shadows, secrets, and schemes. The government's appetite for control ran deep, and projects like MK Ultra, birthed in the Cold War's paranoia-soaked womb, sought to weaponize the human mind itself. Manson's rise wasn't just coincidence. It felt like a twisted screenplay written by unseen hands, playing out too perfectly in the mayhem of the era. Was he the orchestrator, or was he orchestrated? Before Manson set foot in Haight-Ashbury, he was already being shaped by forces far older than the 1960s. He spent most of his life institutionalized, from reform schools to federal prisons. And prisons in the 50s and 60s were more than just holding cells. They were laboratories. For years, the US government had been conducting experiments on inmates, testing LSD, psychological conditioning, and behavioral manipulation under the guise of rehabilitation. While there's no paper trail linking Manson directly to these programs, his time in prison coincided with the very years MK Ultra operatives were running mind control experiments on prisoners. Inside, Manson became a student of manipulation. He read guidebooks for mastering psychological persuasion. He learned hypnosis from fellow inmates. He understood, long before he had followers, that people were programmable. All they needed was the right combination of isolation, repetition, and altered states of consciousness. When he was finally released in 1967, he didn't enter Haight-Ashbury as an aimless ex-con. He entered as a man with a plan. In the heart of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district, a mecca for the counterculture movement, a strange convergence of ideals, drugs, and experimentation took place. It was a world where the lines between rebellion and research blurred, and Charles Manson walked its streets. The Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, founded by Dr. David E. Smith in 1967, became a hub for the city's hippie population. It offered free healthcare to the flood of young people arriving in San Francisco, but its activities extended beyond medical treatment. The clinic became a focal point for studying the effects of LSD and other drugs on human behavior, a project that attracted figures like Dr. Louis Jolyon Jolly West, a psychiatrist with known ties to MK Ultra. West wasn't just a doctor. He was a man with a scalpel to the human mind. His research explored hallucinogens as tools for manipulation, and his connection to the CIA-backed MK Ultra program has been documented in declassified files. Through his work at the clinic, West sought to understand how drugs like LSD could influence the human mind, a goal that aligned disturbingly well with Manson's own methods of control. Coincidence? Maybe. Manson's connection to these figures raises uncomfortable questions. Was the clinic simply a place where his followers sought help, or was it a gateway into deeper experiments? The clinic's staff, knowingly or not, provided an environment where Manson and others could access resources, information, and the very drugs that became central to his control over the family. But perhaps the most baffling element of Manson's rise was the sheer lack of consequences he faced under Roger Smith, his parole officer. On paper, Manson was a career criminal, fresh out of prison, already violating the terms of his parole with alarming frequency. He trafficked drugs, stockpiled weapons, and transported teenage girls across state lines, all things that should have landed him back in prison. Yet, time and time again, Manson slipped through the cracks. His arrests led to quick releases, his parole violations overlooked. It was almost as if someone was ensuring his freedom, allowing him to continue his strange psychological experiment with the family. Was this bureaucratic incompetence, or something else? Some have suggested that Manson was being protected as an informant, a test subject, or an unwitting pawn in a larger experiment on mind control and social chaos. If MK Ultra was the laboratory, programs like Operation Chaos and COINTELPRO were the field tests. The CIA's obsession with control extended beyond individual minds. Operation Chaos, run by the CIA, infiltrated anti-war groups, civil rights organizations, and counterculture movements, seeking to disrupt them from within. Using surveillance, informants, and psychological warfare, The program sought to create division and mistrust among activists. Similarly, COINTELPRO, an FBI initiative, targeted groups like the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement with smear campaigns, fabricated documents, and psychological manipulation. These programs didn't just suppress opinions. They were experiments in mass psychological control, designed to fracture movements and manipulate public perception. Manson's techniques for controlling his followers bore striking similarities to tactics explored in MK-Ultra experiments. He used isolation, repeated drug use, and psychological conditioning to break down individual identities and replace them with blind loyalty. At Spawn Ranch, the family's desert hideout, Manson subjected his followers to cycles of LSD trips and bizarre rituals designed to reinforce his apocalyptic vision of helter-skelter. These methods were eerily reminiscent of the reprogramming techniques tested under MK-Ultra. Then, the conditioning turned deadly. On the night of August 8, 1969, Manson gathered his family and gave a chilling order. Now is the time for helter-skelter. He sent a group of followers, high on LSD and primed for violence, to Cielo Drive, the home of actress Sharon Tate. What followed was chaos and terror, the kind that seemed ripped from a nightmare. The victims were attacked without mercy, their home left marked with ominous messages. The next night, the family struck again, targeting the LaBiancas in a similarly brutal scene. Why? Manson told his followers it was the start of helter-skelter, a prophesied race war that would leave him in control of the world. But even among cult leaders, Manson's vision was uniquely twisted. Where did he learn how to break people down like this? How did he know that LSD, combined with repetition and isolation, could strip away a person's identity? These were the very questions MK-Ultra sought to answer. Could Manson have been unknowingly influenced by the very programs designed to test such theories? And if so, was this the end result of a psychological experiment gone too far? Manson's story forces us to confront larger truths about power, control, and the cost of paranoia. We may never have an answer, because the answers were erased. In 1973, amid growing scrutiny over government overreach, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of nearly all MK-Ultra records. Thousands of documents, experiments, and names vanished overnight, leaving behind only fragments of a story too disturbing to tell in full. But that's just what we know. The disturbing reality is that MK-Ultra didn't just disappear. Its methods, psychological warfare, disinformation, mass manipulation, never stopped evolving. If anything, they only became more sophisticated. Manson was just one name, one story, in a much larger web of power, deception, and control. The real question isn't what happened then. It's what's happening now. And perhaps most disturbingly, what happens when we stop looking?